Have you ever loved someone so deeply that when they left, it felt like the world kept moving but you didn't? This video is my story. A wound I tried to hide, a winter in Denmark that cracked me open, and the unexpected window that pain created. If you're tired hurting, or trying to understand why love feels so heavy, stay with me. You might see your own heart in mine. The wound I tried to hide. There's a strange thing that happens after heartbreak. You walk around pretending you're fine, pretending your chest isn't tight, pretending your mind isn't replaying the same moment again and again. But your body knows. Your breath knows. Even the way you hold your shoulders knows. And that was me, walking through the cold streets of Denmark, carrying a wound I refused to admit was even there. I remember one morning in Aarhus. The sky looked like it hadn't slept. Gray, heavy, a little irritated, just like me. I was standing at the bus stop, hands buried deep inside my pockets, telling myself I was okay. You know that inner voice that sounds confident but feels fake? That was the one speaking for me. You're fine. It wasn't real love anyway. But the problem with lying to yourself is simple. Your heart always rolls its eyes. The wound started long before the breakup. Isn't that how it always goes? It begins with tiny cracks. One forgotten promise, one careless sentence, one moment where you laugh together but part of you feels strangely alone. You don't notice the cracks at first. Love makes you blind in the most poetic, stupid, wonderful way. And in Denmark, where days can be so quiet you hear the sound of your own thoughts bouncing around your skull, those cracks echo louder than you expect. It's funny. Your brain is basically a dramatic storyteller. When it senses emotional pain, it sends signals like, "Hey, let's replay this memory 47 times just in case you forgot how sad you are." Psychologists call it rumination. I call it the late-night emotional karaoke you never asked for. My brain kept replaying the moment I realized the love I was holding on to had already started slipping away. Not because we were bad people, but because sometimes two hearts speak different languages even when the words are the same. That morning, as I stood waiting for the bus, something inside me finally whispered, "Stop pretending." And it wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was tired. There is a special kind of tired that comes from loving someone so deeply you forget to love yourself at the same time. It's a heavy tiredness, the kind that settles behind your ribs like winter fog. Acknowledging the wound didn't make it disappear. It didn't magically heal me or bring the relationship back. But it did something softer, something more honest. It made the pain real. And once pain becomes real, it can finally start to move. It's like opening a window in a room that's been closed too long. The air doesn't rush in all at once, it drifts slowly, carefully, almost shyly. And that was the beginning. Not of healing yet, but of seeing. Seeing myself. Seeing the truth. Seeing the wound I had been hiding even from myself. A Danish winter and a quiet goodbye. There's a certain silence that only a Danish winter can create. A silence so soft and cold that it feels like the world is holding its breath. And that was the silence surrounding the day we said goodbye. No shouting, no dramatic exit, no storms or slammed doors. Just snow falling gently on two people who didn't know how to hold on to each other anymore. Imagine standing outside when everything is white. The sky, the ground, the rooftops, even the air feels pale. It's beautiful in a way that hurts, because it reminds you that nature keeps moving, even when your own heart refuses to. That morning in December, we met on a small bridge near the river in Viborg, the kind of place where couples usually kiss in movies. But movies lie. In real life, sometimes bridges are where things break, not where they begin. He looked at me the way people look at photographs before putting them away. Softly, slowly, like trying to memorize something they already know they are losing. I remember thinking, say something. Anything. But do you know what heartbreak does? It steals your vocabulary first. Your brain goes blank, your tongue feels heavy, and every sentence that tries to escape gets stuck somewhere between your chest and your teeth. We talked, but it wasn't really talking. It was two people letting go sentence by sentence. Psychologists call it ambiguous loss. When someone is still alive, still standing in front of you, but already gone in every way that matters. And that kind of loss is cruel because your mind doesn't know whether to hold on or to grieve. It keeps switching lanes like a confused GPS. Recalculate. 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 He said. Maybe we rushed things. I said. Maybe we didn't try enough. The snow said nothing but somehow said everything. Here's the strange part. Even in that moment I wasn't angry. Just quiet. Quiet in the way a room feels after someone blows out the last candle. I think love doesn't always die loudly. Sometimes it freezes. And that winter, ours froze so slowly that we didn't notice until we were standing there. Breath visible, hearts invisible. When we finally turned to walk away, I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because the cold had numbed more than my fingers. If you've ever walked home after a goodbye like that, you know the feeling. Your body moves, your steps follow the path, but your soul stays behind with the snowflakes, trying to understand how something so warm once became something so cold. And that was the day I learned a quiet truth. Some goodbyes whisper, but the echo stays for years. The street we used to walk. There's a kind of ache that doesn't hit you all at once. It waits. Patiently. Silently. And then one random Tuesday it sneaks up on you the moment your feet touch a familiar street. The kind of street that used to hold your laughter, your plans, your stupid inside jokes that no one else would understand. For me, that street was a small cobblestone path near Nørreport station in Copenhagen. We used to walk there almost every evening, sometimes talking about everything, sometimes about nothing, and sometimes just listening to the sound of our steps sinking like a quiet rhythm only we could hear. The first time I walked there alone after the breakup, my brain decided to play a cruel but predictable trick. The highlight reel. You know the one. The memories you didn't ask for, playing in full HD. No pause button available. There we were sharing a hot dog because we were too cold to hold two. There we were arguing about something ridiculous, which bakery had the best cinnamon rolls. There we were walking hand in hand even when our hands were freezing because we kept forgetting our gloves. People talk about trauma, but they forget that nostalgia can hurt just as much. Sometimes more. It's funny how the brain works. Neurologists say that walking in a place tied to emotional memories activates the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for recalling the past. But honestly, it felt less like science and more like my heart dragging me backward by the collar. Every building looked like it remembered us. The lampposts, the little cafes, even the bike racks looked like they were whispering. Weren't you two here just yesterday? I kept walking, even though each step felt like stepping into an old photograph. And as embarrassing as it sounds, my eyes kept searching for him. Not because I wanted to see him, but because the body has muscle memory, and mine still remembered walking beside him. There's a type of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being in a place where you were once understood without speaking. Halfway down the street, something strange happened. I laughed. Out loud. And not because I was suddenly okay, but because the memory that popped into my head was so stupidly sweet that my heart didn't know how else to react. It was the night he tried to teach me the proper Danish way to pronounce rodgrad med flowed. He said it slowly, dramatically, with full confidence. I said it back and apparently summoned a demon because he doubled over laughing. And now there I was, standing alone on that same street, laughing at the ghost of a sound I couldn't pronounce then and still can't pronounce now. That moment didn't heal me, but it softened something. Like a window opening just a crack, letting in a breath of air I didn't know I needed. Because the truth is simple. Even the streets that break your heart can help put it back together. One quiet memory at a time. When love turns into a mirror, there's a moment after heartbreak when you stop looking for the other person and start accidentally finding yourself. It doesn't happen beautifully. It doesn't happen gracefully. And it definitely didn't happen for me while meditating on a mountain or journaling in a perfect cafe like people online love to pretend. No, mine happened in the frozen aisle of a supermarket in Aarhus. I was standing there, staring at a shelf of yogurts, realizing I had no idea which one I actually liked. I always bought the one he liked. Not because he asked, but because little by little love had turned into a mirror that reflected him, not me. Psychologists call this identity blending, when your preferences melt into someone else's until you forget that you once had your own. And honestly, I didn't notice it while we were together. That's the dangerous thing about gentle love. It can slowly erase you without ever trying to. You give a little here, compromise a little there, adjust this, soften that. Until one day you're standing in a Danish supermarket feeling like a stranger in your own life, arguing with yourself over strawberry versus vanilla yogurt, and I walked out without buying anything. Not because of the yogurt, of course, but because something cracked open inside me. A quiet realization. I had loved him so much I stopped seeing myself at all. When you lose love, your first instinct is to chase the person who left. But what they don't tell you is that the real journey, the hard, uncomfortable, beautifully painful one, is finding the person you lost long before they walked away. Yourself. Back in my small apartment, I sat on the floor, because sadness always convinces you the floor is the only acceptable place to exist, and I asked myself something simple. What do I even like? Not what we liked. Not what he liked. Not what made sense for both of us. Just me. It felt strange, like talking to someone I hadn't seen in years. And in a way I hadn't. The human brain needs identity the way lungs need oxygen. When you lose someone, your brain panics, not because the person is gone, but because the version of you that existed with them is gone too. That's why heartbreak feels like dying. Something inside you actually is. But here's the twist life loves to give. When something inside you dies, something else gets space to breathe. Over the next days I noticed little things, ridiculous, tiny, almost embarrassing things that felt like rediscovering an old friend. I remembered I loved walking alone. I remembered I liked my coffee a little bitter, not overly sweet the way he did. I remembered I used to sing while cleaning. I remembered I once had dreams that belonged only to me, not us. Love had been my mirror for so long that when it cracked, I finally saw my own reflection again, blurry at first, fragile, trembling, but mine. And sometimes that's where healing begins. Not with strength, not with wisdom, but with the gentle shock of recognizing yourself after losing everything else. The day the window opened. There's a point in every heartbreak where the pain stops being an enemy and starts becoming a teacher. Not a kind teacher. Not a patient one. More like the strict, dramatic type who slams the book on your desk and says, "Look, learn. Now." My moment happened on a windy afternoon in Aarhus, right by the lakes where the water always looks like it's thinking about spilling over but never does. I was sitting alone on a bench, feeding ducks that didn't even want my bread, when something shifted inside me. Quietly, subtly, like a door in my chest unlocking by accident. It wasn't a big cinematic moment. No epiphany. No music swelling in the background. Just air. A deep breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for months. And with that breath came a strange clarity. Maybe the wound wasn't just hurting me. Maybe it was showing me something. They say heartbreak activates the same region of the brain that responds to physical pain, the anterior cingulate cortex, which basically means your nervous system is convinced you got hit by an emotional truck. But here's the funny part. Right next to that region is another one responsible for learning and meaning making. So while you're crying into your scarf thinking your life is over, your brain is quietly going, maybe we can grow from this mess? That day at the lake, I finally understood what that meant, and I started thinking about the relationship not as a failure, but as a window that cracked open only because the love protecting it broke first. And through that window, I could see things I never noticed when I was inside the warmth of us. I saw the parts of me I had abandoned. I saw the patterns I kept repeating. I saw the dreams I had postponed just to fit into someone else's timeline. And unexpectedly, I saw him differently too. Not as the villain. Not as the hero. Just as a human being, flawed, scared, hopeful, lost, trying, failing, loving the best way he knew how. Maybe not the way I needed, but still love in his language. The wind that afternoon felt colder than usual, but it also felt cleaner, like it was sweeping something old out of me. I wasn't healed, not even close. My chest still tightened at his name. My phone still felt too quiet. My nights still stretched longer than they should. But something had changed. The wound was no longer a hole. It was a window that showed me the truth about myself. I was not broken beyond repair. I was simply being rearranged, and maybe, just maybe, pain wasn't there to destroy me, but to redirect me. That realization didn't erase the sadness, but it softened it enough for me to stand up from that bench, wipe the cold from my eyes, and take one small step toward a version of myself I hadn't met yet, but was finally ready to. And so as I walked through the quiet streets of Copenhagen that evening, something inside me felt strangely lighter. Not because my feelings were gone, but because I finally understood them. For months, I had tried to pretend that everything was simple, that I could just move on, that I could leave the memories behind like forgotten objects in a drawer. But love, real love, does not disappear simply because we wish it to. As I reached the small bridge near the lakes, the one she used to stop at whenever the sky turned pink, I slowed my steps. The water was calm, almost still, and the reflection of the city lights trembled like a heartbeat. Standing there, I realized something gently painful. I wasn't just missing her, I was missing the version of myself that existed when she was beside me. The version who laughed more easily, who planned the future with both fear and excitement, who believed that love could bloom even in cold northern winters. I closed my eyes for a moment, and the memory returned. A warm kitchen, the smell of cinnamon, her soft voice humming an old Danish song while she poured coffee into two mismatched mugs. She looked at me with those calm eyes, the kind that didn't rush, didn't demand, didn't pretend, and she said, "You always overthink, you know? But it's okay. I love that about you." At that time, I didn't understand how rare it was to be loved not for your strengths, but for the parts of you that tremble. Now, standing on the bridge months later, The same sentence echoed again, but this time it felt different. It didn't feel like longing. It felt like a lesson. A reminder. A quiet truth that love had tried to give me. Even when I wasn't ready to receive it, I slowly opened my eyes. Cars passed in the distance. A cyclist's bell chimed softly. Copenhagen moved on, as cities always do. And yet, in that still moment, I felt connected to the entire past. Every laugh, every argument, every goodbye. I leaned on the cold railing and whispered, almost to myself, maybe losing her wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of understanding who I really am. Because sometimes the most painful love is also the one that grows you the most. Not by staying, but by leaving a space inside you that forces you to listen to your own heart. And on that bridge, under that quiet Danish sky, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A soft, gentle peace. Not because the story was over, but because I was finally learning how to carry it without breaking. Why hearts break the same everywhere? It's strange how heartbreak feels like a private disaster, as if only you have been cursed with it. But the truth is, hearts break the same way everywhere, from Aarhus to New York, from Copenhagen to Tokyo. Science even confirms it. When we experience emotional pain, the same neural pathways activate as when we experience physical pain. That's why your chest tightens, your stomach flips, and your brain replays every embarrassing memory in vivid color. Your body is literally telling you, this hurts. Pay attention. I remember walking along the harbor that afternoon, the wind biting my cheeks, my scarf tangled like my thoughts. I noticed couples laughing, friends sharing coffee, and tourists taking photos, completely unaware of the emotional chaos hiding inside me. And that's when it hit me. This isn't just my story. Everyone goes through it. Everyone loses, everyone loves, everyone learns. That universality was oddly comforting, like standing in the rain with others and realizing you're not alone even if no one knows your name. But there's also something personal in that shared pain. Because while our hearts break similarly, how we respond is entirely ours. Some people shut down, some people run, and some, like me, pause long enough to understand. I remembered all the moments that seemed trivial at the time. Holding hands on the bridge, sharing glances over coffee, debating over which Danish pastry was the best. Each memory wasn't just a fragment of loss. It was a reminder of connection, of what it means to care deeply enough to feel shattered. That day, I consciously chose to observe myself. Not to judge, not to analyze, but simply to witness. I noticed my pulse, my breathing, my trembling hands. I allowed myself to feel the emptiness of that space without trying to fill it. Psychologists call this emotional mindfulness, the practice of accepting pain as it is without resistance. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it changes everything. Because when you honor your own suffering, you give it the power to teach you, instead of control you. Walking back to my apartment, I realized that heartbreak has its lessons hidden beneath the ache. It teaches patience, self-reflection, and most importantly, resilience. The same heartbreak that once made me feel paralyzed now became a teacher, guiding me toward a deeper understanding of myself. And in that understanding, I found the first seeds of peace. By the time I reached my door, I could feel a quiet shift inside me. The wound hadn't disappeared, but it had begun to open a window, a small, fragile opening that let in light, perspective, and hope. I understood then that love, loss, and pain are universal, yes, but how we perceive them, how we choose to carry them, is where our unique story begins. And so I leaned against the wall, breathed deeply, and whispered to myself, This hurt is mine, but so is the healing. Turning pain into a window. There's a peculiar magic in pain, the kind that doesn't hit you like a sudden storm, but seeps in slowly, forcing you to notice things you might otherwise ignore. For me, that magic appeared one gray afternoon in Copenhagen, as I wandered along the little canal streets where the water reflected the pale winter sky. I wasn't expecting a revelation. I wasn't expecting insight or clarity. I just expected cold solitude and the familiar ache in my chest. But sometimes, life has a sense of humor and timing you can't anticipate. I stopped in front of a small window in a cafe I had never entered alone. The glass was frosted slightly at the edges, like the world itself was hesitating to show its full image. I watched people inside laughing softly, sipping coffee, sharing stories, and suddenly it hit me. This wound, this heartbreak had become a lens through which I could observe not just myself, but life itself, with more depth and patience than I had ever known. Pain had opened a window, not the kind you clean or paint over, but one you look through to see differently. Psychologists explain that the brain often uses negative emotional experiences to enhance learning and self-reflection. It's called post-traumatic growth, and while it sounds like a fancy term, it's simple. Pain can teach you. I realized this wasn't about him anymore. The man I had loved and lost. It was about me, my own growth, my own capacity to understand, forgive, and even cherish the echoes of a love that had shaped me. I remembered the nights spent walking along these canals together. The conversations about dreams, hopes, and fears. Those moments, once bittersweet, now glimmered like lessons rather than regrets. I began to see patterns, my own tendencies, my own fears, the ways I had held on too tightly or let go too quickly. The heartbreak hadn't destroyed me. It had given me a new perspective, so I sat on a bench, watching the water ripple under the dim lights, and thought. Every tear, every sleepless night, every pang of longing, it was part of a process. A window had opened, showing me what I hadn't allowed myself to see before. Not just the pain, but the resilience, the capacity for empathy, the strength to move forward without resentment. Pain had become an unexpected teacher. By the time I stood to leave, the city felt less heavy. My chest still ached, yes, but differently, softer, more aware, more alive. I understood that heartbreak wasn't a punishment. It was a lens, a window, a strange kind of gift disguised as suffering. And if I leaned close enough, I could see through it clearly. My heart was not broken beyond repair. It was learning to look again, to hope, and to love, maybe differently, maybe more wisely, but fully. And that realization, that subtle, almost imperceptible shift, was everything. What you can see through yours. By the time the final snow of the Danish winter had melted, I understood something profound. Every heartache carries a window, and every person who loves deeply loses deeply too. That window isn't always grand or obvious. Sometimes it's as small as noticing the warmth of sunlight on your hands after months of cold. Sometimes it's as quiet as hearing a familiar song and realizing it no longer hurts. It only reminds you of what you survived. I remember sitting in my favorite cafe. The same one where our last coffee together had felt heavy with unspoken words. I watched people chatting, laughing, arguing, making promises. And I thought, all of them have stories like mine. Hearts breaking, hearts healing. Love lost, love remembered. And in that realization, I found a strange comfort. It wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't even about us. It was about me. Seeing clearly through the window the heartbreak had created, I thought about all the streets we had walked together. The bridges, the cold winds that had felt unbearable, and the warmth of little cafes that had offered temporary refuge. Each memory, once a source of pain, now became a lens to understand my own capacity for love. I saw my resilience. I saw the courage it took to keep showing up in life, to keep believing in connection even after it broke. I saw the beauty of my own heart, unbroken and still capable of hope. Scientists call this post-traumatic growth, but in life it feels more poetic. It's the subtle shift that turns pain into insight. A wound becomes a window, and through that window you don't just see what you lost. You see who you truly are. You see your strength, your vulnerability, and the quiet power in choosing to move forward. I leaned back in my chair, sipping the coffee that now tasted like hope instead of regret. I realized the people we love, the moments that shatter us, the winters that freeze our hearts, they are teachers. They carve out spaces inside us we didn't know existed. They open windows to a view of life that is deeper, richer, and more alive than we could have imagined when we were blinded by pain. And so, to anyone watching this carrying a wound that feels too heavy, I want to say this: look for your window. It may be small. It may be hidden behind layers of sorrow, but it is there. And when you find it, you will see your heart, your courage, and your capacity to love again. Not because the past never hurt, but because you allowed it to teach you. This is my story, the wound that became a window. And maybe through sharing it you can see through yours too.